So, you want to know more about the life of an underground miner, huh?
Yeah, well, it's not exactly the most glamorous job, right?
Right.
Most people probably picture, guys with pickaxes in some dark, dusty tunnel.
Yeah, I could see that.
But after digging into these mining careers and job hunting resources,
Hmm.
I gotta say, there's a whole lot more to it than meets the eye.
Absolutely. The sources you sent over really paint this picture of a field that's changing crazy fast. Like, we're talking a total transformation.
For real.
Automation and digitalization are like the big buzzwords everyone's talking about. And yeah, that's happening even deep underground, believe it or not.
Well, hold on.
Are we talking like full-on robots replacing miners down there?
Not quite robots taking over, not yet at least. But think more like self-driving trucks and loaders hauling ore through those tunnels. No driver needed.
Whoa, seriously?
Yeah. And honestly, that's just scratching the surface. This whole automation thing, it means these miners need a completely different skill set these days. Tech savviness, knowing how to run crazy complex machinery, keeping an eye on all these digital systems. It's wild.
It's like they're running a spaceship down there or something.
Speaking of which, this whole operations monitoring thing kept popping up. What's that all about?
Is that like an actual thing? Like they're in some underground control room monitoring everything?
You're not far off. It's all about making sure those high-tech systems are all good, running how they're supposed to. These miners, they're like the eyes and ears of the whole operation down there. They're monitoring gauges, looking at data, you name it. And honestly, when you think about how risky it is to work in that kind of environment,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
those tight spaces,
Yeah.
all the potential hazards, it makes sense why this whole monitoring thing is so important.
Yeah, that makes sense. You wouldn't want some system to go haywire when you're, what, like a mile underground?
Exactly.
Speaking of safety, though, I did see in one of these sources that underground miners actually train the new recruits on all the safety procedures.
Oh yeah, that's a big part of the job. And honestly, it's a huge responsibility. Think about it. They're not just handling all this powerful equipment themselves. They have to teach other people how to do it safely too.
Yeah.
It's not just about knowing where the fire extinguisher is. It's about really understanding how all that machinery works, the environment, what could go wrong, everything.
So it's like they need to be tech savvy, but also good communicators, good teachers, all that.
Exactly.
This is starting to sound less like a solitary job and more like a whole team effort down there.
You're right. It really is. That career guide you sent, it really emphasized how important communication is in this role.
Really?
Oh, yeah. They're working with supervisors, contractors, vendors, you name it. It's surprisingly collaborative when you think about it.
Huh, who knew?
They've got to be able to explain things clearly, make sure everyone's on the same page, problem solve together. It's a lot.
Yeah, and I bet those problem-solving skills would come in handy, especially dealing with all that heavy machinery in such a, well, challenging environment.
Oh, for sure.
Speaking of challenging, that career progression they outlined in the guide was pretty interesting. They said you could start by assisting on inspections and then potentially work your way up to overseeing a whole mining operation one day.
It's true. The career path can actually take you pretty far,
Yeah.
even if you're mostly underground.
Right.
But it does mean you got to be all about that lifelong learning, always adapting to the new tech coming out.
Mm.
A lot of the sources mention how important certifications are, specialized training, even building a portfolio.
Wait, hold on. A portfolio for mining. What would you even put in that?
Think of it like showcasing your greatest hits, a collection of all the successful projects you've worked on, proof that you've mastered all the different mining techniques, a record of how good you are with safety.
Okay, so it's like you're proving you're worth your salt, even though it's an industry that's always been about, well, what you can dig up, right?
Exactly. And speaking of proving yourself, the material you sent over also talked about how tech is changing how you even get a mining job in the first place. You ever heard of this thing called RoleCatcher?
I've heard of it, yeah, but honestly, I'm a little fuzzy on what it actually does.
So picture this. RoleCatcher, it goes through tons of job descriptions for underground miners, looking for those magic words, those skills that employers really care about.
Yeah.
Then, get this, it helps candidates tweak their resumes so they're using those same keywords. Gives them a leg up on everyone else,
So it's like a secret weapon, but for job hunting.
pretty much.
That is wild and kind of scary, to be honest. It used to be you could just, shake a hand, show them you're ready to work hard, and you'd be good to go.
It's a whole different world out there now.
It really is. And it makes you think, even in fields that seems super hands-on, like mining, you gotta be on top of all this digital stuff.
No kidding.
This is why I love these deep dives. I wouldn't have even considered that
It's
otherwise.
amazing what you learn when you really dig deep, right?
Exactly. It really does make you think about how much has changed, I mean.
But okay, let's get back to those underground miners for a sec. What are they actually doing down there all day?
Besides, becoming tech wizards like we were just talking about.
Right.
Well, that career guide you sent, it actually had this whole breakdown of their daily tasks.
Oh, yeah.
Inspections, for one.
Makes sense.
Like they're constantly checking the equipment, the systems, make sure everything's in working order. Got to catch those potential problems before they turn into, disasters.
Absolutely. Can't be too careful down there.
Exactly. Then there was this whole thing about, get this, tending to conveyor systems.
What even is that?
I'm picturing like someone running alongside a giant underground conveyor belt, making sure the ore doesn't fly off the tracks or something.
Okay, I see where you're going with that. Maybe not quite that dramatic, though.
Oh, okay.
Think of it more like those conveyor systems. They're like the veins of the whole operation, Moving the ore, the materials, back and forth between the surface and wherever they're digging.
Yeah.
Attending to them, that means doing regular maintenance, fixing any issues that pop up, just making sure everything flows smoothly.
Okay, so less action movie excitement, more making sure things run like a well-oiled machine.
You got it.
Got it. You mentioned extraction points, right? Is that where they actually, do the mining?
Bingo. That's where those high-tech tools and all that expertise come in.
Makes sense.
And speaking of getting things where they need to be, they're also handling all the transportation.
Transportation.
Get all that equipment, the materials, down into the mine in the first place, then back up to the surface when they need it. It's a whole logistical thing.
Like they're running an entire city down there.
Basically.
So we've got the inspections, those conveyor systems, transportation. What kind of, I don't know, knowledge do you even need to juggle all that?
Well, according to this guide, you got to know your way around a wrench.
Mechanical knowledge.
Oh, yeah, big time. And we're not talking about fixing a leaky faucet here. This is the real deal. They need to know how all that heavy machinery works, inside and out. How to keep it running, how to fix it when it breaks, which, let's be real,
Things probably break down there, huh?
all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And when they do, these miners need to know what to do, and fast.
Yeah, you can't exactly just call a repair guy when you're a mile underground.
Exactly. And it's not just about being handy either. The guide also mentioned this whole other thing, production and processing knowledge.
Sounds kind of complicated.
It's basically understanding the whole journey, from raw materials to the final product, knowing how each step fits into the bigger picture.
So they're not just cogs in the machine. They need to understand how what they're doing makes the whole thing work.
Exactly, like having a business mindset almost.
Interesting.
And you know what else was a big one?
What's that?
Education and training.
Hold on, really?
Yeah, it was actually listed as a key skill.
I don't picture an underground miner as a teacher, that's for sure.
Remember how we were talking about them training the new recruits on all those safety procedures?
Right.
That's a huge part of it. They have to explain all that important stuff, make sure everyone understands the rules, build that whole culture of safety down there.
Oh, yeah. Especially in an environment like that. Safety is everything.
For sure. And, for some of those underground miners, that whole mentorship aspect, passing down their knowledge to the next generation, that could be really rewarding.
I bet. It really is making me see this career in a whole new light.
It's not just about, being strong and digging.
Yeah.
You got to be a problem solver, a good communicator, a leader even.
Definitely.
And then on top of all that, there's that whole digital aspect we talked about.
Oh.
Battling the robot recruiters, tailoring your resume for the algorithm overlords.
It's a trip, right?
Honestly, that whole system still kind of blows my mind. What's happening behind the scenes there?
So basically, these programs, they scan your application for certain keywords, specific skills that match what the employer is looking for.
It's like they're reading your resume with a fine-tooth comb, huh?
Basically, they're filtering through hundreds, maybe thousands of applications, trying to pick out the best of the best.
Wild. So it's not even enough to have the skills anymore. You got to know how to make those algorithms happy.
It's a different world out there. The days of dropping off a handwritten resume are long gone.
That's for sure. Good thing we did this deep dive, honestly.
I would have been totally lost otherwise.
I hear that. Speaking of being lost,
Oh no, are we talking about those interview questions again?
the ones that make you sweat just thinking about them.
Yeah.
Those.
Don't remind me.
Well, it turns out there's a real art to prepping for those interviews, And those materials you sent, they actually had some examples of what you might run into.
Oh, no. Hit me with it. What kind of questions are we talking about?
Well, they want to know what drives you, you know, why this line of work? How do you handle pressure? Are
Hmm.
you serious about safety? Things like that. One that really stood out to me was, how do you deal with unexpected issues or like emergencies when you're underground?
Ooh, that's a good one. They're definitely trying to see if you can handle the pressure cooker.
For sure. Goes back to that whole problem-solving thing we keep talking about. Another one was, uh, how do you make sure all the equipment is in tip-top shape, properly maintained down in the mine?
So they want someone proactive, someone who doesn't wait for the conveyor belt to break to, take a look at it.
Exactly. They want
Yeah.
someone who's thinking ahead, anticipating problems before they even happen, someone who gets that balance between being hands-on and thinking like almost a manager.
It's like you're a mechanic, a supervisor, and a crisis management expert all in one.
That's a good way to put it.
And of course, we can't forget about teamwork.
Right.
There was a question about that in there too.
Oh, yeah, working effectively as part of a team in an underground mine. Because down there, it's all about having each other's backs.
Totally. You rely on your team and they rely on you.
Exactly. That trust, communication, being able to work together when things get tough, that's everything.
It really is incredible when you think about it. Who knew there was so much to being an underground miner?
It's definitely not just about, well, mining.
Right.
It's amazing, isn't it?
You never really think about all that goes into it.
It's a tough job, that's for sure. But, those sources you sent, they did talk about the good stuff, too.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Job security, for one. Mining's not going anywhere.
Sure.
And, of course, there's the money, which isn't too shabby.
Right, right.
Plus, like we were talking about, you can really move up in this field.
Yeah, that whole starting at the bottom and potentially running the show one day, that's pretty wild.
It's a good deal, especially these days with so many jobs changing so fast. Mining's got that, I don't know, that solidness to it.
It's not your typical desk job either,
No way, not even close.
which for some people that sounds like a dream come true.
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, you're solving these crazy problems every day using cutting-edge technology, working in an environment most people only see in the movies. It's got to be kind of cool, right?
Yeah, like you're part of this exclusive club. We talked a lot about those problems they face, but what are we actually talking about there? What kind of curveballs get thrown their way down there?
Well, every day is different, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I did see some stuff in the sources about, like, equipment breaking down,
Yeah.
unexpected rock formations popping up, just the general unpredictability of working underground.
Yeah, makes sense.
You got to think on your feet, be able to adjust to whatever's thrown at you. And like we said, teamwork is everything down there.
It makes you wonder about the mental side of things, though, We haven't really touched on that.
The psychological impact.
Yeah, working in those conditions, it can't be easy.
Oh, for sure. And honestly, those sources didn't go too deep into that aspect. But it's something to think about, you know? The darkness, the tight spaces, always knowing there's some element of risk. It takes a special kind of person to handle that day after day.
It's almost like being an astronaut or something.
Going into this extreme environment, having to rely on your training and your team to get through it.
That's a great comparison. And it really highlights something important.
Hmm.
The most crucial thing for an underground miner might not be, how strong they are, but how strong their mind is.
That's a good point. It takes a lot of guts to do what they do.
No kidding.
Well, I got to say, this whole deep dive has been eye-opening. We started out wanting to understand what these miners do all day, and honestly,
Way more than I ever imagined.
it really is. It's like a hidden world down there,
Yeah.
with its own rules, its own challenges, its own rewards.
So to wrap things up, it's clear that being an underground miner is about so much more than just, mining.
Right.
It takes physical strength, yeah, but also technical know-how, those problem-solving skills we keep talking about, and a whole lot of courage. But on top of all that, you got to be mentally tough, able to adjust to anything, and a real team player.
Couldn't said it better myself. It's a career that deserves a lot more credit than it gets.
100%. And hey, maybe this deep dive will inspire a few people to, learn a little more about the world of underground mining.
You never know what you might discover.